Outside Nigeria now, Emmerson Mnangagwa has been sworn in as Zimbabwe's new president. Mnangagwa, the country's former vice president, swore an oath of office to serve as interim president until a leader is elected at the polls next year. He is expected to contest the elections as well. He vowed to uphold the country's constitution and protect the rights of all Zimbabwe's 16 million citizens.
Let me at this stage pay special tribute to one of and the only surviving founding father of our nation, Comrade Robert Gabriel Mugabe. He led us in our struggle for national independence. He assumed responsibilities of leadership at the formative and a very challenging time at the birth of our nation. That is to be lauded and celebrated for all times. Given our historical realities, we wish the rest of the world to understand and appreciate that the policies and programs related to land reform were inevitable. Whilst there is a lot we may need to do by way of outcomes, the principle of repossessing our land cannot be challenged or reversed. Key choices will have to be made to attract foreign direct investment, to tackle high levels of unemployment while transforming our economy. The many skilled Zimbabweans who have left the country over the years for a variety of reasons must now come into the broad economic calculus designed for our recovery and the takeoff as a nation.
Well, editor of the Pan-African Newswire, Abayomi Azikiwe, joins us now via Skype on the news for this very latest development, the swearing in of a new president in Zimbabwe, Emmerson Mnangagwa. He has promised an all-inclusive government, and he has also extended his hand to foreign investors to try and come to the country. My question is, how quickly do you think these foreign investors will troop to Zimbabwe, considering the hyperinflation of their currency?
Well, right now, Zimbabwe really does not have a national currency over the last several years. They've been heavily reliant on the United States dollar, the South African rand, the Chinese yuan, and others. The currency collapsed several years ago as a result of the economic sanctions that were imposed by Britain and by the United States. It's going to be difficult for the current leader to reorient the economy towards the West. There are elements within the new political arrangement inside the country that want to do exactly that. So it's going to be a challenge. It was encouraging to hear that he intends to maintain the land reform program, which was by far the most significant reform that was enacted by the government of President Mugabe, which brought about the sanctions over the last 17 years by the United States, Britain, as well as the European Union, which played the critical role in crippling the economy inside the country.
Abayomi, looking at the, I'm taking it you viewed the inauguration ceremony and also borrowing a leaf from the earlier question by my colleague. IMF had said yesterday that the country would need to do and act fast now to resuscitate the frail economy, talking about, cutting government spending. From what you've seen today now, do you get a hint that perhaps the government under Mnangagwa will do just that?
It remains to be seen. There are elements within the ZANU-PF party that are pushing for a shift from the look east policy of President Mugabe to more of a Western-oriented economic approach. But they're going to have to lift the sanctions. Now, the United States State Department has already set preconditions for the lifting of sanctions, and it's not clear exactly whether or not ZANU-PF will be able to meet those preconditions. They are calling for somewhat of a coalition government to run Zimbabwe. The problem with that is that there's no or very little legitimacy among the opposition parties, those outside of ZANU-PF. Also, key aspects of the economic policy includes what is described as indigenization, meaning that any foreign investment coming into the country would have to have 51% ownership by Zimbabweans. This is a major impediment as far as the Western industrialized countries are concerned. They want to have to pay no taxes. They do not want to be obligated to the Zimbabwean people for accounting of the profits accrued from the various projects that they would be involved in. I mean, Zimbabwe has tremendous potential economically. It's just the sanctions that have strangled the country over the last 17 years. For example, there's a huge deposit of platinum in Zimbabwe, one of the largest concentrations of this strategic mineral in the world. Yet, due to the dropping of platinum prices and also the sanctions, Zimbabwe has not been able to benefit from this. Also, the diamond industry has huge deposits of diamonds. Yet, there's been problems that surfaced nearly 2 years ago in regard to the diamond industry. It'll be very interesting to see how much of the existing economic policy in Zimbabwe is going to be changed under the now interim president, Emmerson Mnangagwa.
He had mentioned that the most significant reforms undertaken by Robert Mugabe were the land reform program in Zimbabwe. Now, although Mnangagwa has said that he will not revert that reform, he has also promised that his government will compensate farmers whose land were taken from them. What will that guarantee?
It's not clear. I mean, where is the Zimbabwean government going to get the funds to repay the former British settler agricultural barons who dominated the land inside the country for more than a century? The war, the Second Chimurenga that was fought during the 1960s and 70s, was over the question of land, returning the land of the Zimbabwean people back to them. And we've seen, even despite the sanctions over the last few years, according to the work of Ian Scones from the Institute of Development Studies in Britain, that agricultural production increased as a result of the breaking up of the large farms and, of course, fostering independent agricultural development by African farmers. So it's going to be a challenge to see how, if he enacts this policy, where the money is going to come from to, quote, recompensate or compensate, unquote, these white farmers. The Africans who lived under those conditions were exploited heavily for decades, working in virtual slave-like conditions. So it'll be very interesting to see how this type of compensation is going to be brought about.
Great talking with you. Abayomi Azikiwe, the editor of the Pan-African Newswire, of course, joined us from the United States. Thanks a lot.